The prosperity gospel is really no gospel at all.
You said, no, I've learned to outmaneuver this weakness of not giving God his best.
They're living in mansions, they're flying in jets.
That is God penetrating your heart. It's burning on the inside of you, and you need to make a vow of faith of $1,000.
Every year, televangelists attract more than believers. They draw hundreds of millions of dollars from all around the world.
They would be selling drugs if they weren't selling religion.
What attracted me to the foundation was it was a place where nobody acted. You just had to be yourself. That's it.
Ole Anthony and the Dallas-based Trinity Foundation has kept a watchful eye on televangelists.
Minister Ole Anthony worked closely with ABC News and the staff of Primetime Live.
It was Ole Anthony, founder of the East Dallas homeless ministry Trinity Foundation, who masterminded the investigation and helped expose some of the top televangelists in the country.
We investigate religious fraud. We've been doing it for over 25 years. We drive into places where we can get into dumpsters and we dive into dumpsters. But mainly what we do is look for clues online and expose extravagant lifestyles.
How bad is what they do? How bad is what we've seen tonight?
I think it's pure evil. I think it's worse than crack cocaine addicts because it's blaspheming the God of the universe.
Oh, I'm sure they hate us like crazy. Mostly because people like you keep coming by and asking us questions about why do televangelists hate us.
They began looking at the televangelists who were making it big and taping their shows 24/7 and looking at their lifestyle, examining where the money went. And that became what Trinity was about to the outside world. But that's not really what Trinity was about to the people who were involved with it.
One of the ladies that we were really, really good friends with that was in Trinity Foundation who had left before us had a brain aneurysm and died. And she and I had exchanged a lot of emails, and I went back and looked through those emails, and in one of them she said, maybe you ought to write a book about the Trinity Foundation. Not of anger, but of enlightenment. And you could tell my story and all the other Trinity Foundation former members' story.
You know, I was interested in just going in and looking at it fresh and seeing what are they doing? Is there any validity to Wendy and Doug Duncan's claims? And what other, they may have had an experience, but what about other people? I just tried to sort of cast a wide net and started looking at all different facets of Trinity.
When I was in the service at the time, and in 1976, when I got out, I started looking for a church to come to. And I remembered this strange Bible study that my friend had brought me to years earlier.
Somebody had heard Ole and heard of this Bible study, and they said, you need to tell me what he's saying that's wrong, because I just know there has to be something, And so I went and I listened, and everything I heard was not only spot on, but mind-blowing.
Well, back in the day, Ole had started the foundation in the early 70s, and he had been trying to do radio and television from his own peculiar point of view.
But the human race is God's sperm cells. And just as you, as a male, don't give one diddly squat about the sperm cells that are released all over, 50 million every time, but the only ones you're concerned with are the ones that join to an egg and become a child. And as that human sperm cell joins that mystical egg, then you become part of the new creation.
He would often say things that were very shocking to people or inappropriate.
Ole is an interesting character to listen to. One of his statements back then was God hates your guts. It was because, all the God loves you bumper stickers that were going on.
But people really get offended when you call a human race sperm cells. Because everybody's running around saying, smile, God loves you. Well, God doesn't love you. That's ridiculous. If God loved you, there wouldn't be babies dying all over the world. And 250 million people starving in Africa. And God doesn't love you. He loves that new creation. That's the only thing he sees.
A lot of late nights at the coffee shop. And I started inviting my friends, which is how Doug Duncan got involved.
Well, they want to be the community that the church is supposed to be. Here's a group of people who are loving, who are just really trying to live out the gospel.
Doug's talking about where he goes to church, and he said, you should come sometime. He said, on Sunday evenings, he said, we just have like a big old family dinner. Everybody was so nice and so loving, and I thought, oh, yeah, these people are really nice and friendly, and it made me feel good. So
and real Christians.
Yeah, I was very impressed with that they were trying to live like first century Christians.
In the early days, Trinity Foundation members were meeting literally 6 days a week for Bible study. And then on Sunday for a meal and worship and singing.
But over a process of years, it got darker and darker and more abusive and more controlling.
He started this thing called hot seats. And the hot seats really took on a life of their own.
People were required to write down secret, shameful things that had happened to them in the past, maybe abuse or sexual sin, and just list everything that had happened to them and then everything that they had done.
The whole idea was to just have the person would have to just expose themselves raw to the group, and generally they did.
Sometimes it lasted hours, where you would where you would psychologically break the person down. You would tell them every bad thing they ever thought and every bad thing anybody ever thought about them, and it was just a brutal process. And people would eventually end up in a fetal position on the floor, screaming and crying out to God for mercy.
Then the group, Ole would come in and hug them and love them. Everybody would, it's sort of this love bombing idea that you see in cults. They would all, just praise them for breaking through and to recognizing who they really were. But this was a very damaging practice.
I never liked to call them hot seat, but there was confession, and there was some people were uncomfortable with those, but they were never mandatory. They were always voluntary.
One man actually had a psychotic break as a result of the psychological pressure that he was put under.
That was one of the scariest things I ever saw in my entire life. He was a pretty normal dude, and just a great guy, and Ole pushed him too far, and Ole didn't realize it. And I literally watched his mind break, and after that, it seemed almost brain damaged.
I think the hot seats lasted into the 90s. I'm not sure why they ended finally, but maybe it was recognized that this is not working, people are leaving.
It had gone, as I said, from sort of this renegade Bible study to Ole being really feared. And it became much centered, if you will, around marriages.
He had to give his approval if someone wanted to get married. And that was very obvious in the case of Wendy and Doug Duncan.
So we dated for 7 years. Couldn't get the blessing, couldn't get the approval to get married. 7 years. And this was in the no premarital sex days.
They never liked his wife, Wendy. Deep down, Ole felt like, Wendy had it in for him, if you will.
So went down to the Lair, that's what we call the restaurant. Went in there, Ole's eating his breakfast, and I said, Ole, I need to talk to you. I said, I am so tired of you telling Doug that he's not content in being single and not wanting us to get married. And he said, well, I don't give a blanky blank if y'all get married. I said, then why do you keep protesting? Why won't you give us the blessing? I said, your voice is so loud, I can't hear God's anymore. And then I ran out the door. And that was the end.
One of the reasons that you know a cult is a cult, by the way, is when you leave, if the other people can't speak to you, that's a cult.
Like Rick, I think, is the one who said it's worse than a divorce, because usually in a divorce you get to keep half the friends. But if you leave a cult, you lose all, it's like you lose all your friends, you lose your beliefs.
A cult tells you what to do, what to read, what to watch on TV, and we've never done anything like that. We're certainly not a cult.
Oh, there's The number of people who claim Trinity is a cult is probably legion. I mean, there's a lot of people who claim Trinity is a cult. And I think that, read the book if you want to. It's not going to bother me any. I mean, we are clearly not a cult. No one comes back from Afghanistan, from 3 years in Afghanistan, and falls right back into the same cult. And I spent those 3 years in Afghanistan. I have 3 more years in Kosovo. And again, I came right back to the very same cult. This is not a cult. This is just a place where you get a chance to hear some truth.
The Trinity Foundation knows how to work with reporters. They know how to get what they need, help them get audio, video, evidence. They want to use the Trinity Foundation's materials for their own work, and they don't really look at the other side of it. It's almost like Trinity is a story that's too good to be true. You don't want to look at it too closely.
I wanted to make that clear so the devil can't lie to you and say, see there, them preachers spending all that money, just fat cats riding around. No, we're not.
We're investigating a lot of people right now, but we don't like to tip off people about our investigation, so if you'll forgive me, I don't want to say much more than that.
I do think the work that they have done against televangelists specifically has been valid and good. I think it's ironic in many ways. The televangelists want to control through greed. Trinity has often, to me, wanted to control through notoriety.
Harry calls it the only X-rated Bible study in the world, so don't be offended if something comes out, because I've determined that the only way that the material can be life and not death and just some stupid rules, is that it has to be without judgment. It has to be spoken as it's revealed. And that's what the Bible calls prophecy. And God intends all of us to prophecy, where you just speak what's on you, never judging it, good or evil. So that in a nutshell is what's happening. Okay? It's not a cult.